Welcome to the new Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news and initiatives that focus on the development of cybersecurity economics. You don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert to get plugged in. Your host brings it straightforward, asks the tough questions, and brings the cyber world to a level of understanding for everyone. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join our host as he introduces the topic for today's new Cyber Frontier.
Welcome back, everyone. We are doing another edition of the new Cyber Frontier. We have a very special guest today from the Blockframe community. David Scott is with us. How are you today, David? Could you tell us a little bit about your background and what it is that you do at Blockframe?
Sure. Background, electrical engineering training. Math major, physics minor as well. I'm a professional engineer, so I specialize in electrical engineering, control system specialization, and I've been working in that field, particularly smart grid, for I guess initially in my career for maybe 10, almost 15 years. Security, a lot of the major investor-owned utilities across the United States. I did some major deployments in Maryland for BG&E when they first did those 2.1 meters, Pepco, you name it, I've been there. And so, cybersecurity lead there in a consulting fashion for a large company. I also volunteered for NIST, worked back in the day with, Annabelle Lee and, Justin Searle, a bunch of folks, creating some of the NIST initial guides. So I was co-author with another about 100 industry professionals of some of the NIST, the early NIST publications, as well as some of the initial publications for Department of Energy it had as well for like maturity models for the energy sector. And went on to become some other things. So that I've been involved in some government work, in some industry work in utilities, and I wound up actually going out on my own, and I have my own company now, and it's called Trick Out My Crib. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, we just, we do residential renovations, and we just, do a lot of home, automation, sustainability, heavy focus on security as well.
Okay.
Can't let that go. And we've also done some things in the city. So, intelligent lighting, replacing incandescent lights in an entire city. So I was the lead engineer where I stamped the plans for a couple locations, and so that's it. So big.
So that's it. Yeah. Just a little grain of sand and on a big beach, right? No, I mean, we have so much we could talk about in so many different areas. I have a client. I teach advanced cybersecurity courses for the Department of Homeland Security, TSA ground. So a lot of people don't realize. Everybody knows about TSA air, right? So that's about 1/3 of TSA. The other 2/3 is the TSA ground folks. That's over the road trucking, transit systems, railway systems, pipeline systems. So think of all the operational or OT, OT technology, in power grids and in all the things that you're talking about. And some of their biggest concerns is, we're starting to connect all these things. And so over the years, based on, what you've been doing, how have you seen the increased risk, and how do you think we're doing addressing that risk for, things like the power grid and transit systems and operational technology?
Well, I think the awareness has been something I've seen that's increased. And through that awareness, I've seen a lot of investments in technology, a lot of really amazing companies blossoming. And we've unfortunately seen a lot of incidents rising where before, you have like the Joe Weisses and a whole bunch of folks that are kind of like, crying, saying something may happen, but it's reality now where we actually are seeing things happen. And we can name a million things. I think the most recent, interesting thing to me was in Lebanon, the pager incident.
Yeah.
A lot of unfortunate, folks, had some bad things happening. But in transportation, which is what you're referring to, I think we're seeing some things with automated vehicles. I think we're seeing things on highway systems, lighting. There are a lot, and it's all about trusting these like physical objects traffic light systems, safety, whatever it may be, these physical lighting, and that are now cyber controlled. They're now controlled by bits and bytes. And so I see a lot of technology evolving, and cybersecurity companies evolving, and I see a lot of really smart people deciding to have careers in this area where before they didn't find it as sexy and as interesting or as relevant.
Yeah. So I talked about a little bit earlier. I spent 10, 12 years as an IT guy before security was really a thing, right? And then the evolution of security is like, well, why do we need to do that? I just need to solve problems. What's change management? That kind of stuff. There was, then we look at the evolution of this type of technology with artificial intelligence, with IoT systems, smart cities, and we're dancing around in areas that based on what you described earlier, you've actually worked in. There was a study done in Hamburg, Germany a few years ago. I did this presentation on how they analyze. You know what the number one reason for traffic congestion in a city is? People are looking for a place to park. And so they integrated technology based on some of the things you described that will secure a parking spot for your vehicle until you can get to it to alleviate that congestion. And it decreased, I believe it was like 30% of the traffic congestion within the city of Hamburg. Based on what you've done over the years, how do you see things with smart city technologies and the evolution of that being able to solve problems similar to what we saw in Hamburg?
Yeah, it's interesting. In working on one of the projects I worked on, smart cities, in particular the lighting project, it was so fascinating to me, the number of different constituents involved. I never would have thought like Metropolitan Police Department would be involved in lighting. The FBI, what are they doing on lighting, right? What is telecom, all these telecom, like cellular providers doing on lighting? The gas company, why do we have to involve a gas company on a light? And so, one of the things I realized is the amount of data that, these lights are actually transmitting, within their infrastructure, within their wired infrastructure, and wireless infrastructure. The other thing is just the importance of just the different systems within controlling intelligent cities. So I think one of the things is having all this data and being able to leverage it to make intelligent decisions, whether it be for reducing our carbon footprint, which is what these particular lights are doing, in addition to increasing our safety, right? But they're also used as hubs for intelligence gathering and just keeping people safe, right? Shot spotters are another example that are on there, right? That the police department uses
to get a quicker response, right?
Exactly, right? It's not just lights, and so, but there are areas that are providing power and providing convenience, and sometimes they're covert, right? In order to just provide, in this case, safety. So, yeah, those are some of the things that I'm seeing from a lighting perspective on.
Well, we're having a great conversation with David Scott on engineering and smart city technology and other stuff. We're going to take a break and come right back after this message from our sponsor.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back to the new Cyber Frontier. We're here with David Scott. What's the name of your company again?
Oh, so my company's Trick Out My Crib.
Trick Out My Crib. Yeah. What is that all about? Where'd you come up with that name? That's great.
Yeah, I had this thought. I didn't want to just have the company be a regular renovation company. I didn't want to just, make great bathroom renovations or paint. But I really wanted to have someone call us that had a challenge that couldn't be solved through buying something from Home Depot.
Sure.
You had to finesse it a little bit in order to get either the desired result or some emotional feel. An example, a customer of ours had a very extremely heavy chandelier and a very high ceiling. And they had a house, they were, fortunate enough to be able to have a house cleaner that came in from time to time, but it was difficult for them to clean the chandelier. This is an exact example of it tricking out a crib, but being able to put in a pulley system on the chandelier so that it really, goes down to allow just a simple job as cleaning. They were able to afford that. Other things too are just from a sustainability standpoint. There are customers that really want to have a better carbon footprint, right?
Sure.
But some customers are realizing that they want to have an additional source of income because the job markets may not be as secure as they are, or house cost of housing has gone up.
Right.
So some of the things we do are help them do things like, have an additional source of income by turning a junk room or a basement into like an income generating short-term rental and long-term rental. So we do a bunch of different things with a house to kind of help folks think through unconventional ways of making their home fit their lifestyle, help them achieve their goals. But the other thing I'll say I do, in addition to trick out my crib, I do have a part-time role that I'm super excited about, and it's with Blockframe, working with Dr. Chris Gorag and team. And so my role there is their chief marketing officer. Super excited about that. I've been on the team, probably it's been a couple months now. And that's some other things that I'm doing.
Yeah, Blockframe, they're getting ready to explode. It's great to see that team has evolved over the years. Mm-hmm. We've participated with Dr. Gorag and Senator Lambert and the evolution of the technology to a point where there's some exciting news coming pretty soon.
Yeah, stay tuned. It's incredible. I think everyone wants to know, like, what are the ingredients of my food? Like, what am I eating? And they want to attribute, right? And they want to be able to know, where did this come from and who is responsible? And the fact that Blockframe is like the digital equivalent of that for such critical industries like medical and defense, and energy is it's so exciting. So, more to come.
Yeah, the integrity of a ledger associated with a blockchain to provide that level of integrity for those things that you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Excellent.
Yeah, amazing.
All right. Well, so when we take a look at some of the other areas, it's funny because I love the story about the chandelier. The engineer brain came out here and says, well, we can solve that problem, mm-hmm. right? So we can take that heavy load and put some engineering concepts and solve that problem, right? So mechanical engineering, included with probably some automation right there. My brain's going 1,000 different directions. I love having these conversations. When you look at the security aspect of all those things that you're providing for a client, are you doing things like segmentation for like the cameras and, my toaster or my coffee maker knows to turn the toaster on and whatever, the smart homes, right? How do you address security and maybe segmentation? Like, I'll tell you, I won't allow any of my kids' friends mm-hmm. on my home network. Mm-hmm. I have a different segment that they can get on, but they can't get on my home network. Right. Because I don't want the risk associated with what they may bring onto my network. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, so you have role-based access. And so it's interesting. There's a product that I love, Savant, that we use, right? It's one of the leaders in home automation. And, Preston, and then you have like L7 as like the final tier. But all of them, and including others, you could just have guest access in different interfaces, whether it be a tablet, that guests may be able to control the volume, as an example, on a television or speaker system, or may be able to dim lights and on. However, a guest will not be able to look at security cameras, right? So that's one example. There are others where just through your automated locks, you may come in. There may be some where you have timeouts, right? Perhaps you provide exterminator or perhaps a house cleaner, assuming your dog walker, a limited time frame. So of access, and based off of that, then it gets wiped away, right? There are things you could do with automation where your house gets locked down at a certain time. So that, security comes on, the lights are off, which is energy efficient, but the security comes on, which is safety. So, and there's also thoughtful placement of technology as well. So,
yeah, identity and access management from, a consumer's perspective that allows them to safely manage that automation, but then, those other trusted relationships like the cleaner. We have a cleaner. If you've got a pool maintenance company or a landscaping company, right? So there's expectations that at certain points in time, when your Ring doorbell goes off and you're like, oh my gosh, you're going to look at it. So, but to integrate some of those technologies as well, so that the consumer with a level of assurance and safety can, feel comfortable that, some of the things that you're integrating into their environment is actually safe. Like to come back after the next break. We're going to hear from our sponsor, and we're going to come back and finish up our conversation with David Scott.
Blockframe Technology offers next-generation blockchain managed trust and security. Unique non-fungible tokens are used to secure software bills of materials to provide data quality and security for every transaction in your supply chain. Deploy advanced peer-to-peer product security, scale zero trust capability to millions of IoT devices, allow vendor tracking and accountability, and rapidly reset from compromise. Unchangeable, time-sequenced blockchain data provides next-generation security using machine learning trust algorithms and audit analytics. Start securing your supply chain today by contacting Blockframe at www.blockframetech.com.
Welcome back to the new Cyber Frontier. We're here with David Scott, engineering cybersecurity guru. Spent many years in engineering at the national grid level, all the way down to now he's got his own company doing automation in homes. Understanding, let's go back a little bit. So let's talk about international threat. All right. So from your perspective, with your background, especially with the grid engineering perspective, we hear from China, for example, or one of our other adversaries being Russia, the ability to disrupt supply chains or attack national grids. If I can shut down your grid or do an EMP, we're talking about resilience, right? There was a Polish researcher that came out several years ago to show in Poland, he developed, and it's on GitHub, I think the Polish word for it is kamerka, which is the English word is camera. And what he did is he created an application and used Shodan to do web crawl over the internet to discover all of these utility systems, highway OT systems that were connected to the internet with no security, no identity access management. And they did an overlay for Google Maps to show where these things were located. And people didn't take him serious. So he did it for all of the EU. And then a year later, he did it for all the United States. Oh. So that shows where all of these non-secure systems are, that you could literally, with an IP address through the internet, log right into these systems. Doesn't that kind of stuff scare you? Scares me.
Yeah, it does. It does, but there's a caveat, I think, to all of it. I think there's more sometimes to the story, but sometimes there's not. I think for some systems, they're not actually touching the OT technology. Sometimes they're touching the billing systems, the CRMs, etc. They're touching a lot of the enterprise systems, which are interconnected, but not really. And they're really well protected. The interconnection between that IT and OT, right? That business side and the actual operations side. So that gives me some confidence. There are some companies as well that are going through, they're required through law, right, to actually be analyzed, whether it be like NERC, or FERC,
right,
et cetera. They actually have to be analyzed, and it gives me a little bit of faith that there's some baseline level. It's maybe not the highest level bar, but there is some baseline level of security, in place. And that then there's monitoring. And then there's a lot of sophisticated companies coming out now that are doing some of the monitoring and alerting, blocking, tackling, firewall, et cetera, that's in place. So I feel like it's not just always as what we're hearing on the news, which I know you're aware of as well. We're just having a conversation.
Sure, yeah.
Conversation, right? But I do feel like there's some safety things. What worries me sometimes are the small utility companies that don't have the budget and the funding.
Right.
And then there are some adversaries. I mean, there are some supply chain issues that concern me. It concerns me the plan B. You know, if something is actually physically destroyed, transformers, et cetera, and just that delay that it takes, right, in order to get there.
Right.
You know, is everybody trained on things, you know, like Black Start or what have you? Like, can they actually do that from a mechanical standpoint, like a manual standpoint, or is everyone just really well trained only on the tool, right, and
Sure.
the software, but they're not as well? But I feel like, you know, at the end of the day, these systems are they're control systems, and if the software goes down, they still can be run old school. Right? There's still, you know, the show could still go on in some cases. And I'm hoping, that they're still engineered and the engineering is going well. I mean, I'm out of the game now. It's been about almost a year, right? But, in my exposure, I feel like there's some levels of maturity in some companies and there's some that are not. And I feel like the industry is rising.
Yeah. I recall, in 2017, I get to participate as a keynote presenter at the European CISO Summit in The Hague. And one of the other keynotes was a retired Royal Air Force Major General, Andy. I can't remember his last name, but you know, after the event, we were at the bar talking about different things, and you know, being both military guys. He was telling me that at one part of his career, when he was a full-bird colonel, he was actually assigned to the Pentagon working as an attaché for Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. And he was at the Pentagon the day of 9/11. And if you could choose any part of the Pentagon, which would be the worst to crash a plane, that's where the plane crashed, and it took out all of their telecommunications, according to Andy. He goes, well, they had no means to be able to communicate, and they're down in the bunker underneath the Pentagon, and everybody's running around all excited, and Rumsfeld was, you know, Andy says, was pretty calm, cool, collective. He goes, hey, Andy, he says, you know, we've had an RFP on the street, a request for proposal to remove all this old DoDIN, Department of Defense, you know, networking, telecommunications stuff that's been not used for decades. He goes, you know, we pulled the funding for that several times, just to save money because of budget constraints. He goes, I need to know if that still works. So I need you to go check that out. And lo and behold, all that infrastructure had been laid, you know, back in the 30s and 40s and was working just fine. And so that's how they were able to establish communications with the president and other means as well. But it just goes right back to going back to the basics, right? The fundamental. Sometimes that playbook needs to take a few step backs. It's not the overwhelming capability of the technology that we have that may not be usable now. What is it that we plan for that we used to do, right? Grease pencils and marker boards, right? So
Exactly.
that, and so sometimes, to your point, we've got to be able to go back. One of the challenges I think we have there, though, is who's got the tribal knowledge to be able to do that?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, it's our engineers. It's the folks that, you know, when they're invited to these IT meetings, we always want to talk over them sometimes, you know? Those are the folks that flip CIA on their head, you know, and for telecom industry, for utilities and for transportation, you know, no one cares about confidentiality, right?
Right.
As much as availability.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So those are the engineers that's why the Pentagon system was working. And in the electric grid too, smart grid. The electricity is going to stay on if there's some, you know, wireless attack or any kind of IT attack. Homes are still going to receive energy because the availability is built in and prioritized. But there may not be billing occurring, you know.
Sure.
You know, you may not know about the consumption, right? So with an IT attack, and of course there could be other more sophisticated attacks that could potentially lead to an outage, but in general, yeah, I see that focus on availability and then the integrity, right? And then confidentiality with these like life safety systems, these important systems as the importance of those engineers back then.
Absolutely.
And I think that's why in an industry you still focus on that with those particular segments of the industry. In other areas, it's more important, some other things. Obviously, military confidentiality would be more important sometimes than other things because of the loss of information being the loss of life.
You know, we're sitting there having this conversation. I was just reflecting back on that movie, Space Cowboys, you know, right? So but why did they pull Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones and the others, Donald Sutherland back in? Because they had tribal knowledge. They were all engineers who engineered a capability, and they're the ones they're sending up in outer space to defuse a Russian, nuclear threat, and so the engineers are needed to be able to analyze and dissect what the actual situation is from a whole different perspective, not a leadership perspective, not from a governance perspective, or I've got to save my backside perspective. It's from here's what it is, this is what exists, and this is how we solve those problems. This is why engineers are so important. They contribute significantly, and they're often not looked at in that realm. So, we're at the end of the segment. I think we could go on for quite a bit more time, but we've been having a great conversation with David Scott. David, thanks for contributing from an engineering perspective. Smart grid, automation of home systems, bringing years, decades of experience in a perspective a lot of people don't get to have in a discussion for this segment. So thanks for the contribution for this segment.
It's been amazing, and appreciate it. Thanks for having me on as a guest.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of New Cyber Frontier. Remember to get involved. Often we think that someone else will handle privacy and security in the virtual world, but you are the only one truly in command of your virtual fate. Join our mailing list so we can keep you informed of breaking news and new releases. If you have an idea, if you have a question that you would like to hear answered, or if you want to get involved with our efforts, reach out to us at newcyberfrontier.com. We also encourage you to visit our sponsors' links, as they are the ones that really make this show possible. I want to thank each of you for supporting the show, and we look forward to seeing you back for the next episode of New Cyber Frontier.